it was long, and then she chopped
Oh, really? Just recently?
Yeah.
Oh, how do you like it?
It's grown on me.
Short hair don't care.
Yeah.
I know, it took me a while. I had never, ever chopped my hair. I had, like, you guys knew, like, long hair for my whole life. So it was kind of emotional to cut it off. And then once it was gone, I was like, bye. Hi, everybody.
Hey, guys. Cassie here with Liz. And I don't really know what I'm supposed to say, except for we're really excited that Liz is here. And she's going to answer all of your questions, I'm sure with great enthusiasm and excitement. And yeah, so that's as good of an intro as I can get for you, Liz.
Great. Hi, Joelle. Hi, Heatherlyn. So good to see you guys. Yeah, this is so fun. I was explaining that this is my first ever combo fusion in-person / online event. So we're just making history right now with these fusion events. So I'm so excited to be here and to be in Cassie's beautiful home. There are a few things that I love more than connecting with my sisters, whether that's here in person or virtually with you guys. So basically kind of how this is going to work is that we're going to have a little, maybe this is the hot seat. I don't know. Is this the hot seat or this? This is the hot seat. And we're going to have some rotating questions coming through. And so you're going to get to hear from each of the women that are here at this event today, which is really fun. And they're going to be asking their own questions. And then we also have a list of fantastic questions that you guys have submitted. So we're going to be asking those questions. Monique, hi. So good to see you hanging with your mama, which is really fun. And then also we really encourage you guys to ask questions from wherever you are. So even if you didn't submit a question, if something comes up or if there is a follow-up to something, please feel free to ask a question. We have an hour and it'll go by really fast. And so we're gonna kick off. So for anybody who does not know, I'm gonna give a very brief, and anyone who knows me, unfortunately, knows that it can be not so brief. So I'm going to give you the very brief story of Sseko, and then we're just going to dive in. And these events for me have been so fun because I think what's most exciting to me is that there is the Sseko story that I'm going to tell you of how I moved to Uganda and started the sandal company. But what's really fun to me and the whole purpose of these events is really an acknowledgement that each of us have a story, right? We come from a history and a past, and we've made decisions, and we have really specific giftings and skill sets and visions for what the world could be like. And so this is a time and place for us to explore how all of those things kind of interweave together. And so I love that I've been seeing y'all sharing your own stories. And I think the heart of Sseko is building a global sisterhood. And I think part of building a global sisterhood is about acknowledging those stories and celebrating them, and then being willing to kind of enter in and be a part of one another's stories in really special ways. So I'm Liz, and my abbreviated story is that I went to university and I got a journalism degree. And so my hopes and dreams were actually quite specific, I would say, in that I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to travel the world. I don't know if you're familiar with Nick Kristof, who is a journalist who works for the New York Times, and he travels the world and he writes and he reports on issues that are facing really just kind of general human rights issues, but he also has a pretty specific focus on issues that are facing women and girls that live in extreme poverty and conflict and post-conflict zones. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. And so I graduated from college, and I had all of these dreams and visions that, you know, the New York Times or the Washington Post or someone was going to hire me. They were not interested. Turns out when you're, 22 and you don't actually have any good job experience and you've never really left the United States of America, people are not wanting to send you to Afghanistan to go report live on the ground. Okay, lesson learned. They never call me back. New York Times, I'm still here. No, I'm just kidding. So anyway, I kind of had this moment where, well, actually I was graduating from college, had to get a job. Bills were, coming, and I had to hashtag adult. And so I got this job. And I was about 3 months into this job, and I was actually doing some research for a client, and I came across this video called the Girl Effect video. And this video, it's like a 3-minute animated video about what happens when you educate and empower one girl in a developing economy. And I'm sitting at my desk, and here's the thing. I had spent the previous 4 years of my, getting my degree. Like, I knew a lot intellectually about the challenges facing women and girls. And so this video didn't have any new information. It wasn't like a new statistic that all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh. But yet, I started bawling. I was just crying at my desk, and I'm not a super particularly easy crier. And so it caused me to look inward a little bit and go what is up? Why am I gutted right now? And I realized that the reason I was so affected by it is because it caused me to ask this question. Because the whole focus of the video is one girl. What happens when you educate, invest, and create opportunity for one girl? And I had all of these really big dreams and visions and thinking about how do we address issues facing the bottom billion of, at the base of the pyramid, and how do we create policies and things that will bring millions of women out of poverty. And then I looked at my life as it was that day, sitting, on the 14th floor of this corporation. And I had to ask myself this question of okay, are all of your passions, are all of these things you really care deeply about, have they made an impact in the life of one girl? Not a million girls, not 10,000 girls, but has one girl actually been impacted? And the answer to that was no. And that was kind of devastating to me. I had almost realized that the bigness of my dreams had kept me from making a change and an impact in the life of one woman. And I was I don't even have a single friend that's a girl that grew up in extreme poverty. And for me, all of a sudden, the problem kind of completely switched. It stopped being how do we create change for millions of people? And instead, go meet and be friends with and learn from one girl and see how your story and her story might get tangled up. And that's a very different way of thinking about the world, right? And so I realized that if I was going to do that, I probably wasn't going to do that from the 14th floor of this corporate world. And so I quit my job 3 months in, so my parents were real stoked about that, and bought a one-way plane ticket to Uganda and decided that I was going to show up, and my new mission was make a friend. Make a friend. That was it. It was really not too complicated. And so I showed up in Uganda and made some friends, and just started trying to learn as much as possible about what are the actual issues facing women and girls here. I know what I've read, and I know what, these huge, World Bank says are the major issues, but I want to know from the mouths and the hearts and the stories of the women who are actually living it. And here's where I'm going to make a really long story about a 6-month-long, very dramatic season of my life into 1 minute. But I decided to start a nonprofit, a kind of classic sponsorship organization, and became very convinced through just research and friends and asking questions that I couldn't do that for a variety of reasons, and we can get into this maybe in the Q&A, that in this specific community with this specific problem, what we needed to do is to create a sustainable marketplace solution. And we needed to employ people, and we needed to generate revenue, and we needed to contribute to the local economy, and we didn't need a sponsorship program. And so that left me this journalism student who had no interest and no background in business, with the challenge of oh, shoot, dang it, that actually sounds like starting a business, which I had no interest in doing. So I decided to start a chicken farm. That failed really quickly. That was quite a season of life. I now have chickens in Portland, Oregon, because, #Portland. They haunt me every day just with the reminder of my failures. And then that failed. So now I'm take 3. What am I doing? What is my life? It was kind of a demoralizing place to be in, actually. I'm a college graduate, and I'm living in a basement hostel, paying $5 a night for a mattress, essentially. And no one wants to hire me. Nothing I've tried has worked. I keep running into all these brick walls. And then I was thinking about, okay, what's something we can just do or make, and we can employ women in between high school and university. And I'd made a pair of these funky, strappy sandals when I was in university. And one of my friends from back home was like, what about those sandals you made when you were in college, in your dorm room? And honestly, I was like, great, cool. Everything else I've tried has failed. Sure, why not try sandals? And so that started this hilarious season of life where for months I traveled around the country trying to find raw materials and prototype these sandals, and eventually came up with something that was good enough. And I will emphasize that it was good enough because they were not nice. They would never pass our quality standards today. But they were good enough. And so I went to the school and I hired 3 young women, Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca. And I promised them that if they made these sandals for the next 9 months, that they would go to college in the fall. And luckily, these 3 crazy women who are just so a part of our crazy sisterhood were crazy enough, like you are and you are, to say like, yeah, okay, like this seems like the odds are against us, but like, yeah, we'll do it. And they said yes, and they made sandals for the next 9 months. And then they went to university the following fall. Meanwhile, I was back in the U.S. selling sandals out of the back of my car and trying to share their story, the story of Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca, and selling these cool strappy sandals that were kind of unlike anything anybody had seen, and sold enough until they could go to university. And then at the end of that, my husband and I, we were newlyweds. Ben had proposed about 4 days after I got back from Uganda. We kind of looked at each other and were like, well, shoot, if it worked for Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca, we can't just stop. Let's do it again next year and try to hire even more women. And so that is how the Sseko story began. Now, there's a lot in between here and there, but I'm hoping that maybe we can dive into that more during the Q&A.
All right. Did any questions pop up?
And the rest is herstory.
Right.
I haven't seen any, but
just hellos. Just
hi,
fun
everybody.
hellos. Hi, everybody.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
That I've been thinking about a lot lately is like, because I'm starting my own business and then also being a Sseko fellow.
Yeah.
Like, things get hard.
Yeah.
Really quick. I don't think as hard as the challenges maybe you experienced in Uganda, but how do you, like, what are some things that strategy, like, how do you have grit? How do you just like keep going when it seems like the odds are fully against you?
Honestly, I think for me, a big part of it is, and I hope, I struggle with this answer because it's the truest answer in my heart, and yet articulating it in a way that doesn't sound trite. I never want to minimize someone's problems or stressors, because I think that we're all in different walks and we have different, capacities and different struggles. For me, it is a very real and constant thought of what other women, and specifically women that I know that are a part of the Sseko community, and a lot of times those are our sisters in East Africa, have endured for the sake of their families and for their dreams and for their vision. And that is incredibly challenging and inspiring to me, to kind of have these like moments where I'm really grounding myself. And I think for me, a lot of it comes in gratitude practices of like, even when I'm feeling really stressed out, which, just to be very clear, I do. Like, there are times where it's just like, oh my gosh, I'll be on the verge of feeling like what I feel like is a panic attack, right? And it's just like work and being a mom and having a toddler and being a wife and trying to contribute to my community and these like looming deadlines and like this sheer kind of like weight and responsibility of having like built something that people depend on. And that can be like really, really, really heavy. And I think for me, stepping back and taking a moment to really ground myself and say, but like, here I am, and I'm in this like body that like works and that is relatively like healthy and pain-free. And I have a husband who like I'm not in an abusive relationship, and that there's this really like stable force that I have in my life. And there's just like these things that become so normal for us that we reckon, like, that it's so easy to forget about. That, I mean, my first thought, and I'm not exaggerating, my first thought when I wake up every single morning is like, oh my gosh, I'm like in a house that has electricity, in a bed that's very comfortable, and like I'm the perfect temperature. I'm not too hot and I'm not too cold, and I'm laying next to this person that I'm married to, and I chose to be married to him, and that was like my choice, and I'm in like a safe, mutually beneficial relationship. Like these very, very, very basic things that I know very well firsthand are not basic and are not taken for granted for so many of our sisters across the globe. And does that minimize the stress that I have in my life? No. But does it put it into perspective? For me, it really does. Like, it is hard to feel like the world is ending and like you have been so wronged when, you know, a colleague or someone you're doing business with or something falls through or someone doesn't take their word. That like sense of like injustice of like, I'm such a victim here. It's really hard to believe that narrative when you like zoom out a little bit and you're like, really? In the grand scheme of the world, like you're a victim in this situation. And for me, that is like a good before 6 a.m. butt kick, you know, where
Right,
it's just
sure.
like, where it's just
For
like
sure.
to recognize those blessings and the privilege. Like I take very seriously that it's like, I don't know why I was born into the context that I was born into, but I was, and I think with that comes a lot of responsibility. And so for me, that is very much so the narrative that continues to make me say like, so yeah, it's going to be hard and yeah, it's going to be stressful. But I think that we don't get to live really interesting, purposeful lives without experiencing a little bit of attrition and rub. And so I'm going to choose that. And I think once we decide that we're choosing something, feels a lot easier than if we have a posture of like, this is happening to me. I can't run away from this. And so many of us have this ideal that we can create a life that's free of friction. And it's just not true. And then that leaves you constantly feeling like you're a victim of that, as opposed to saying like, I'm deciding to choose to engage in this. And then I get to decide what my perspective is when I do run into those kind of sharper edges and how I choose to engage with that. So, yeah.
I love that answer.
It was
All
kind
of
of
that.
long.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. No, that was good.
You want another question?
Sure. Molly, do you want to pop over here and ask
Molly
it?
wants to pop over.
Sure.
Yeah, let's get the rotating hot seat.
Sure.
Okay, we've got a couple questions. Amen to that. We have so much agency for ourselves here. We got to pass it along. I love that, Joelle. We've got some gratitude, love. We've got, okay, we have another question, so we'll put that in the queue.
What does it say?
What are your success habits?
Ooh,
And
you can answer
Sarah-
that now. That's a good
Oh,
dovetail.
okay.
Yeah. How about that?
Success habits. Gosh, I would say it's probably more similar to the answer that I just gave, to be honest. Like, I think perspective is a huge one. I think Joelle hit on this. Agency is so big. And by that, I mean, like, we are in charge of our own dreams. I think this idea of, like, recognizing, like, no one in the world will want something for you in your life as much as you want it. And no one is working and no one is waiting for opportunities to make that happen for you. And no one is staying up at night, like dreaming and scheming about how you can take the next step forward. And that's okay. Like,
That's on you.
That's on you. Like, that is on you. And I think, you know, like, there is this sense, I get this sense from a lot of people that it's like, well, I'm waiting for the door to open. I'm waiting for somebody. I don't know what it's like. Are we waiting for like a formal invitation here? Like, are we literally like waiting to open something in the mail that's like inviting you into, like, because it's just like, newsflash, the fancy invitation with the vellum and the calligraphy to live an interesting life, no one will send that to you. Like, because that's not a thing. Like, you just, we choose that, and then we every day with, I think, grit and discipline, decide to walk forward in that. I know I have been victim in my own business to what I would call the silver bullet disease. And you know, I'm just going to tell you this. I hate hearing silver bullet stories. They're very discouraging to me, and they only happen to 1 out of 1 million people. And so I was actually listening to a podcast the other day that was interviewing a famous comedian, and I love comedy, y'all. Comedy, I think, is an art, and there are, like, the people who have gone through and made it climbed the comedy ranks, to me, are like psychological war heroes, right? Like, I don't think that there is anything harder than the life of like a stand-up comedian. And I am so inspired by the journeys of comedians because it's so hard. You know, it's just like you're playing in these crappy clubs and no one's paying you anything and no one shows up and people are booing you. And it's like this utter humiliation. And yet for the pure love of the art, people keep showing up. And that to me is like, just, I could like, oh, I love it. And I love it. And I was listening to this podcast thinking it was going to be a really similar story. And it was actually a woman, she's a comedian who I love, and, or I don't like follow her, but I've heard some of her bits. She does like Bonquiqui, and she does the nail salon. Angela, I can't remember her last name. She's on Jen Hatmaker's podcast, which I love, by the way, and I'm going to get ready to knock a little bit. But anyway, her story was very different. And her story was like, basically, I wasn't that into comedy, but I ended up taking this free comedy writing class. And I did this one bit and it went completely viral on YouTube. And then the next day, nonstop, people were calling me and trying to book me. And it was like literally overnight, she had this comedy career. And that was the story. And I just remember being like, I was driving to a meeting and I sat in the parking garage to listen to the end of it. And I remember literally just going like, with a kind of sour, I just was like, bink! That's not a story I need to hear. Like, that's not helpful to me. That's not inspiring, because what that does in me is it makes me go like, oh, there's some silver bullet out there. You can't work for it. You can't plan for it. It's not taking small steps towards it. It's just like the universe might happen to hand you this thing. And then once it hands it to you, then everything else is going to explode and it's going to fall into place. And as a business owner, I have absolutely fallen prey to that disease of like, something's out there that's going to happen, and then once it happens, Sseko's just going to blow up, and we're not going to have any issues anymore, and like we're just going to grow, and everything's going to go well, and I just have to kind of sit and like wait for that. And to me, that is the kiss of death, because I think there are 1 in a million people that will happen to, and I'm not saying, I think that woman's story is true, but it's not helpful. Right. because for the 9,999 others of us, success actually comes literally 1 incredibly painful inch at a time. And sometimes centimeters, and sometimes there's a few steps back, and it's us like having the perspective. And the minute we get into this, like, I think toxic belief that it's like, no, I'm not going to move until I see the rocket ship, and then I'm going to jump on the rocket ship, then it's like, you're going to stay there forever, unless you happen to be the 1 in a million. So for me, it's so much about de-glorifying the rocket ship and the like, this thing just happened and it went viral or it went crazy, or, you know, if you're a fellow, the one person came to my party and then they ended up building me, you know, this $1 million business. And it's like, no, that doesn't happen. Like, you know how you do that? You do that by showing up every single day, and by being faithful, and by when you have failures, like getting back on your horse and taking your gratitude practice and being really gritty and being curious and getting just a little bit better tomorrow than you were today. And so for me, that's my biggest kind of success mentality.
Yes. Amen.
We've got a couple.
Joelle asked earlier, what was one of the biggest challenges in those early days? Speaking of needing to be, you know, gritty and knowing that there isn't going to be that silver bullet that's going to make Sseko work.
Y'all, there are so many. Like, the ones that really stand out to me, there were some dark days. I mean, there were really a lot of, Monique said scrubbing 1,000 sandals with a toothbrush. That would be a really good example of one. I don't know if you guys know this story, but we were probably a few years old at this time, maybe 3 years old. So we had kind of been going, but it was still like every day was like, are we going to make it? Is this real? Like, it felt like at that point, any small thing that went wrong could kind of be the thing that took the last brick out and it could all crumble. And so we had been working for months and months on sending our first ever container shipment. So up until this point, we had been shipping things via air freight. And it was a huge goal for us because it's a lot cheaper to be able to send things in a giant container via sea. And so it was a really, really big goal for us to be producing enough where it made sense that we could send a container. So for months and months, we saved up our sandals instead of selling them or sending them via air freight so we could send them in this container. We had a huge party at the workshop the day the container left. It was like a really big deal. It was a big deal for our team in Uganda. It was a big deal for us as a business that like we're big enough to like send a container, and you know, we're getting more efficient and we're able to get our costs down and all of this stuff. And it was supposed to take like 70 to 90 days from Uganda to get to our warehouse in the US. 70 days passes, 75 days, 90 days, 100 days, 110 days, 120 days. So we are already in panic mode because there's inventory that we had expected to have, that we had already paid. You know, we've paid, by the time the sandals leave Uganda, it's like we've paid the wages, we've paid electricity, we've paid for the raw materials. Everything is like done, and now we're at this greater and greater gap because we're not getting money in. So it was incredibly stressful and a really hard financial time for us. And we finally got the call that the container had landed and it was at the warehouse, and Ben and I like celebrated and we were like so stoked, and we're like, okay, we just barely, but we made it. And then we get this call from our warehouse and they were like, hey, Ben and Liz, and we had just moved to Portland and our warehouse is in Kansas City. We got this call from our warehouse and they were like, hey, Ben and Liz, we've got a problem. And we were like, what? They're like, well, the reason the container was so late is because it sat at the port in Mombasa, which is on the ocean in a hot, humid, salty climate. And it looks like there was a leak in the container. And there's some sort of mold that is covering all of the sandals. Several thousand pairs of sandals. And we don't really know what to do about it. So what should we do? So Ben and I literally bought a plane ticket the next day, both of us. It was like July in Kansas City. Our warehouse is not air conditioned. And we went because it's like our warehouse, that's not their job. You know, it's like we fulfill things and like you need to make the call. And again, this is not our problem. This is on you to fix. And so we got there and I mean, they were right. It was like some sort of like mold that had grown all over the sandals. So we stayed in Kansas City for 4 or 5 days. Literally, we would wake up at like 5:30 in the morning, drive to the warehouse, be there until they kicked us out. They graciously would like have staff stay until like 7 or 8 at night. And we like had toothbrush with like a bleach water, like, you know, mix of disinfecting. And we literally just would like scrub every single sandal. We only were able to probably salvage like a third of them, and 2/3 of them we had to throw away. And so, I mean, it was just like every day was just like you woke up with this just like elephant sitting on your chest of like, I know what today is. I know what the next 15 hours are. And like, it's literally, and every time we threw a sandal into the like throwaway pile, it was literally like, was this the sandal? Like, was this the thing that was gonna like sink us? And y'all, I could literally start crying right now talking about it. It was like, we've worked so hard for this and we've given up and just like throw away the sandal, and really thinking like, we don't know if we're going to be able to recover from this. Like, we have this huge financial gap that we can't meet, and now those sandals that we were counting on selling, and like, and honestly, that was one of the more dramatic ones, but it was just like, those are the times where it's just like, but you choose to say like, we don't know if it's going to be the end, but we're going to work as if it's not, and then wait until we're proven wrong. And we're going to give the situation the benefit of the doubt, and we're not going to step away from the table until it's very, very obvious that this is the end. And the thing is every single time we've thought, this is it, this is the end, we're not going to make it through this, obviously we're still here, you know? And it's like every time something happens and there's some provision or there's some like way of problem solving and actually making it happen. And so once you build up a certain amount of those, then you flag the red alarm less and less, right? Because you're like, okay, I've felt this before. Right. I was actually talking to a friend last night about childbirth. And I had read before I went into childbirth in a book, it was like 80% of women during natural childbirth will have the thought, I'm going to die. Like, I don't think my body is going to make it through this. And I remember when I read that, actually being so encouraged and happy that I read it, because I remember thinking, I feel really glad that I have this piece of knowledge, because now, had I gone into childbirth thinking, you only think you're going to die if you're going to die, I would have freaked out if I thought I was going to die. Now I have this like intellectual piece of information that if I think that, I can go back and say like, but a lot of women think that they're going to die in childbirth, and most of them don't, you know? And so I think surviving and thriving and success is a lot like that, of like, I'm feeling all of these things that are telling me it's the end, or that's telling me I'm a failure, or that's telling me it's a stupid idea and I'm an idiot and no one's going to listen to me or buy my product or come to my show or, you know, partake in my business. And I know that signal that I'm sending myself isn't necessarily reality, that it's like there's a reality that exists that you can push through towards, and that it's not determined by that panic mode thought. And so I feel really grateful that I have now 7 or 8 years of experience that tells me, when you think it can't get worse, first of all, you're wrong, it can. And second of all, it'll also get better.
So let's fast forward a little bit to the days before Sseko had the Fellows program.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about why you all decided to move it from boutiques and, you know, that retail model to direct sales?
Yeah, I love this. You know, it's funny. This is a really fun and scary part of Sseko history. It's interesting, you know, a lot of people, when they hear the Sseko story, there's a lot of focus on the very, very beginning. Wasn't it scary to move to Uganda and, you know, quit your corporate job? And that sounds like a good, I don't know. I just look back at that. I'm like, I mean, I was 3 months into my corporate job and I was like 22. If I'm being really honest, like, wasn't a lot on the line, you know, like, whereas,
pride, maybe.
yeah, exactly. But, you know, it's like, I didn't have a family. I didn't have like 20 years of a career that I was risking. Whereas this pivot, it's not as glamorous to tell the story. Like, no one's like, oh, wow, that was so brave. But it truly was much scarier to make this shift than it was to start Sseko, because at this point we had built something.
Right.
And the something was kind of working, and we had people on our payroll and people who had agreed to be a part of it in East Africa and in Ethiopia and in Kenya and here in the US. And so this shift really felt like, no, the stakes now, it feels like a less sexy, glamorous, brave, crazy thing to do, but actually the stakes in reality are a lot higher. But for us, at this time, you know, we were probably 5 or 6 years old. We had been selling through like a traditional wholesale retail model, meaning we traveled across the country. We hired sales reps to go in, and the sales reps basically then go to stores, and they get stores to sell the product, and then the sales reps earn a commission off of that. And that was kind of the whole wholesale side of our structure. And then we had our online business. But at this time, our wholesale network represented about 75% of our revenue. So the vast majority of the money our company is making is coming from wholesale. And we had about 500 stores, and, you know, we were going to trade shows several times a year, and it was working. It was like we were growing year over year. And so we were in this place where our retail side was growing, and we had hit some really big milestones in Uganda. So part of our 10-year vision for being in Uganda is that we would have no Americans on staff full-time. It was really important to us that we had built up local core competency and that our executive and management team were local. And we wanted to own our own factory. Every year since we had started, we were renting little places and getting kicked out and then having to go and find and move our entire factory. And every time we grew, we had to find a new space. And so having like our home in Uganda was really important to us. And we had accomplished those 2 really big things. And then I would say third, just overall feeling really solid about our impact model. You know, for the first couple of years, even though on paper, the basic things that we do actually haven't changed over the last 8 years, which is pretty rare kind of in the development space. Millions of little tiny tweaks and things about how we work and, you know, the structure and the impact and all of those kind of things. And we were feeling really, really good about what we had built in Uganda and our team over there and the impact side of things. And so Ben and I really came to the table, and it kind of gave us a chance to ask what we would say is the most important, most dangerous question, which is to evaluate, and this can be your business, this can be your life, this can be your family, right? To look at it when it's not in crisis and to say, okay, like this is working, this is going, how could it be better? Like, how could we, instead of kind of getting lulled into this sense of like, we did it, we made it, let's just keep doing the same thing over and over again, saying like, is this it? Or or is there something else? And meanwhile, this interesting thing was happening to me as the leader of Sseko. I was doing more speaking and like kind of, in a more like outward facing role. And I was getting a lot of feedback and questions and emails and messages from primarily women, all different life stages, really. I just graduated from college. My youngest child just went off to school, and I'm thinking about going back into the career field. I'm in a corporate job and I've been here for 10 years and I don't feel passionate and I don't feel a sense of alignment. What do I do? It seems like you've figured out, you've quote unquote found your passion, which you can get me on that soapbox in a little bit. You've found your passion. How did you do it? And I wanted to engage every single person that reached out, but I was also like, but I can't, just like go to 2-hour long coffees with everybody that emails me. Unfortunately, I have to like keep my company afloat and moving forward. And so, but it was this kind of heavy, interesting thing that is like, there are hundreds, I know I'm only hearing from a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of these women that happen to know about me and that happen to have been brave enough to reach out. This leads me to believe that there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of women, specifically in America, who are asking this question of like, how does my life and my purpose and my passion and my dreams and my skills and my reality of needing to have a job and earn an income, how do all of those things fit together? Because it feels like they're not fitting right now. And so that to us was really, that was a new, what I would refer to as a new wicked problem. That it was like, this is really interesting. And our whole philosophy all along on Sseko in Uganda has been kind of hijacking a traditional business, manufacturing, and turning it upside down, saying instead of making the producer and the manufacturer invisible, right? Because that's what most American companies try to do, right? They're producing overseas at a factory somewhere in China, and they don't want you to ever ask who's making it and how much they're getting paid and can you go visit the factory, right? And so we've said we want to flip that completely on its head, and we want to make the manufacturers and the producers like the center of the story, and we want to celebrate them. We want them to be so integrated. And so we started kind of thinking like, well, could we take that same, and yet here we are in the US running a very traditional business. We're not running our business any different than any other company. We go to trade shows, we pay thousands of dollars to have a booth, and stores come to, visit, and you try to sell to the stores, and you get a sales rep, and you do all this stuff. And we were just like, well, could we like hijack the retail side of our business to fix this other interesting problem that feels actually quite similar to this interesting problem that our sisters in East Africa are experiencing, right? And so we were like, mate, we would have to like make it a part of our business. Like this can't just be like a side thing that we're, run an online course about finding your purpose, but then be like, okay, peace out, good luck. But we're actually a shoe company, so how would that work? And so we like really started dreaming about like, well, what if instead of selling to stores that carry 200 other brands and may or may not actually care about what we're doing, or may or may not even know. This was always heartbreaking to me. I remember being on the coast in Oregon, walking down the beach. I see this woman, she's wearing a pair of Ssekos. And of course, I'm like so not cool. I'm a nerd. I'm like, you don't need to think I'm cool. Oh my gosh, you're wearing Ssekos, And so I was like, where'd you get your sandals? And she was like, oh, I got them at this boutique. And she remembered the boutique that she got them at, but she had no idea about the sandals. She didn't know the brand name. She didn't know where they were made. She had her connection was to the retail institution, not to the brand, which is quite similar to how a lot of people think about retail, right? Where it's like, no, I got it at Anthropologie. Well, yeah, you did, but who made that? Who was the designer? Where was it made? Like all of those things, you kind of connect more to the retailer than to the brand. And that was always so devastating to me, because I was like, that it just felt like lost energy. That it's like, you could be a brand advocate for us. You could be a returning customer. You might be a returning customer to that retail partner, but you're not super loyal to us as a brand. And in fact, you actually don't know anything about the sandals that you're wearing. And so the idea of getting to sell our products through people that were, one, on this journey to build really interesting and meaningful and purposeful and connected lives, and two, that, to be completely frank, I think could do a much better job at selling the product than having them sit on a shelf, being sold by, some retail person that's working part-time that's like, I don't really know how those work, or I don't, really, I don't really know what the story is behind them, but you should buy them anyway, was super, super exciting to us. And what I started to hear from women is that there were women that wanted to be what I refer to as impact entrepreneurs. They wanted to build businesses that made an impact in the world, but yet they were like, but I don't have a product, I don't have a service, I can't go build a manufacturing company in East Africa, I can't create this like impact model. And so it was really fun to get to say like, okay, we'll do that. We'll build the product. We'll, like design it. We'll develop it. We'll make it in a way that you feel super proud of and connected to the story. And we'll build this like beautiful like world in Uganda that you could visit someday, in this like sisterhood. And then your role will be like to build a business off of like educating your customers and sharing the story and providing great customer service and doing styling and making your end customer feel as dignified in the process of being a part of this brand as everybody kind of along the chain. And so we didn't know it was direct sales at the time. It was like we kind of built the idea out, and we were like, we're going to sell the products to women, and then they're going to sell the products to their friends, and they're going to build their own small businesses. And then for our women that are like really hungry and really want to be entrepreneurial, we're going to let them build their own teams and build their own organizations. And it was probably honestly like 6 months in, I feel like, before we were like, oh, this exists. Like, other people have done this before. Like, this is called like a direct sales company. And so I'm actually really grateful that we started out so naive. I mean, we have no background in direct sales. It's funny, we were talking to another direct sales company a couple of days ago, and we were like, how'd you guys get started? And they're like, well, my grandfather started this company that, is a multi-billion-dollar direct sales company. And like, he basically invented incentive trips and da-da-da-da-da. And so it was like their whole family business for generations was direct sales. And here Ben and I were like, I mean, I literally don't even have like a great aunt that sold Mary Kay. Like, I didn't know like what this was. So, but in some ways in hindsight, I'm really grateful for that, even though it was like a year. And any of y'all who were fellows early on know that we were just like throwing spaghetti at the wall before we even realized like what the structure. But what I love is that I feel like we were able to take the skeleton of a direct sales model, which I think is brilliant. It's essentially empowering with no overhead costs individuals to be entrepreneurs in their community. But then all of the skin and the muscle and everything that we got to layer on top of that really being, I think, quite new and quite interesting and fresh in the way that we do that, and kind of the ethos behind what we're doing, I think is really innovative and unique, and I think appeals to a very different set of direct sellers, right? So 80% of fellows today have never been involved in direct sales before. That statistic is virtually unheard of in the direct sales industry. And I really believe that is because our culture and our product and the way that we do business, and then ultimately our impact and the purpose that's like baked in, allows us to access a woman, I think, like myself. Like, I'm 99% sure that if Sseko, if I wasn't doing this, like, I don't know that I would ever work for a direct sales company. I don't know that I could ever get so excited about selling a product that didn't feel like I'm opening my home because I so deeply believe in this vision and this mission, and the product, of course, but product enough wouldn't be enough for me. I'll be a loyal customer, but I don't know that I'm going to build my career off of something that I don't deeply believe in. And so I really believe that we're building something that's allowing us to access a really, really unique group of women. And I believe that there's a lot of us out there, and that I think part of y'all have asked to, about kind of the mission and vision and kind of future of Sseko. And I think that's kind of part of what my vision and dream is that Sseko is kind of part of redefining the MLM direct sales world. And I 100% believe with all of my heart that social selling and non-traditional retail is the future of retail. It's going to e-com and it's going to experiential retail. And ultimately, like, the best structure in order to do that is through a direct sales structure. And I think in 10 years, a lot of companies will have adopted this model, and I feel excited about getting to be one of the ones that's kind of starting to redefine that.
So what would you say to, we have had a few people in our questions say, that they're maybe considering being a fellow, but the idea of MLM and kind of the negative connotations that are a part of that description are a little bit like, it makes them hesitant. And honestly, as a fellow, like sometimes it's hard for me even to overcome some of those connotations when I'm talking to people about what I do and why I do it. So what would you say to someone who is considering being a fellow, but that might be the stumbling block for them?
I'm going to say something that I think no leader of a direct sales company should ever say. And I'm going to say it on the internet.
We're recording this.
I know. And I'm like, Lord, you're going to look back on this and say, girl, why you run your mouth? I'm going to say, me too. But guess what? Like, me too. Like, I never wanted, the idea of running a direct sales company or running a multi-level marketing company or a social selling company, like literally, I was anti-business, let alone anti-business that had any kind of baggage for my whole life when I was in university and graduating. This is not what I would have chosen for myself. But guess what? I get to write the rules. I get to be a part of rewriting it. And by not doing something because I'm afraid of what somebody else is going to think of me gives them all of the power, right? That is me saying to you, person who happens to have baggage with MLM, you get to decide what the rules are. You get to decide what your assumptions are. And then you get to put that on me. And I'm just going to sit here and take it and say, you get to make that decision for me. And in my weakest moments, I feel myself going like, yeah, you get to decide, and I want you to like me, and I don't want to be the leader. You know, I want to do this, or I want to do something that's like sexy or cool or has no baggage attached to it. And then I'm just like, bull crap. What I want to say is something different, but I'm on the internet, and so I'm not. But like, no, like you get to have your ideas, but then guess what? I get to be a part of changing your mind. And that to me is super exciting. And then it feels really empowering that it's like, actually, this is my narrative and I get to write it. Sure, you get to decide whether or not you get to be a part of my narrative and my story and the way that I'm doing business and the way that I'm building my career. But no. You do not get to put that on me, and then that affects the decision that I make. And so for me, I would be completely lying if I said that I didn't also sometimes feel those insecurities. But the reality is every time I say, but nope, this is on me. I get to rewrite the rules. I get to do things how I want to do things. And then it's up to someone else to decide whether or not that they want to join. And so I think for anyone who is experiencing that, I would say, whether or not you end up deciding to join Sseko, you have to take back your narrative. Like, this is your story. This is your life. This is your career. What some random stranger or great aunt at Thanksgiving thinks about you doesn't matter. And if you build a life trying to make the random stranger that you meet sitting next to you on the airplane or the great aunt who's actually not that invested in your life, if you let them make the decision for you, like, you will not build a life of purpose and passion and impact. It is not until you say, like, this is my story and this is my narrative and I get to write the rules, that you start to get to do really interesting things.
Yes. Yes. Sorry, I'm going through the list of questions.
Great. Should I
covering them?
Can I interject a quick?
Yes. Will you come?
Do you want to sit in the hot
Will you come
seat,
sit in?
Marcy?
Oh, just everybody wants to see Monique's mom's pretty face. Come on.
Do it.
This is just a quickie.
Peer pressure.
Okay. It just reminded me of something that I remind myself of when you think about what other people are thinking about you. Don't worry what people think about you. Just live so nobody believes it.
That's a good word. And she goes, boom, mic drop, and then she leaves the hot seat. I love that. And I think that's such a good word. And that is like, yeah, that same spirit of just like, you can say whatever you want, but it's on me to live the life and to show what it is, who it is that I am and what I care about. And if you're not going to take the time to get to know that and make a real decision based off of that, then you're disqualified from me caring what you think about me. Okay, so we've got a couple thoughts. Most of us feel that way. Karen and I were just talking about that. I looked at several others, but I just couldn't get on board because of the heart. I needed the mission, the impact, the vision to stand in the gap, have this as part of the story, and make an income. It was very clear that I was supposed to be a part, and I am so glad you made that decision.
Ooh, good.
Okay.
Go. Do it.
We've got a new hot seater.
Alrighty.
Okay.
This is my first time really hearing about the company, so this is really exciting, and I admire what you have done. It's
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thank
It's
you.
really beautiful, and I love to hear your heart about why you created it as a direct marketing, that's good, right? It's really good because people are getting to participate. My question is, you obviously didn't have a business background.
Obviously.
So what have been some of your greatest influences and how have you learned business?
I would say I am such a learner, and I feel like I have a spirit of curiosity, and I have no shame in not knowing. And I think, I have this phrase that I use quite a bit, talking about channeling your inner beginner. And I feel so grateful that when I started Sseko, I didn't have any business experience. In fact, I hated business. I didn't have any fashion experience. In fact, I wasn't interested in fashion. That I had zero ego going into it, actually, because I didn't pretend to be someone who was this great business leader or who was super interested in fashion. And I think that actually led me to being very comfortable with my lack of knowledge and very open to just like learning and absorbing and being okay with being wrong and making mistakes, because I didn't come into it being like, well, I have this MBA and I come from this great family background of really successful business people, or I've just been so stylish and like I had this great eye since I was a kid, and now I'm out in the world and everyone is expecting me to succeed in this. And so I think for me, it's been about finding people that I really admire. I read a lot of books. Not just from business leaders, but I would say, to me, I'll read anything from someone who's run a, Fortune 50 company to someone who's built a really interesting life, because I feel like all the way in between there's like principles of business and entrepreneurship. And I think that, I don't know that there's a ton of, I think that there's a lot more overlap in different professions and like being successful in different ways than we think that there are. And I think a lot of that comes, and a lot of this is what we've really boiled down to being kind of the core Sseko leadership principles. And when we built out those 7 core principles, one of the things that I did is I said to myself, like, is this relevant if you're running a Fortune 100 company? And is this relevant if you're a stay-at-home mom of 3? Is this relevant if you are an artist and you are out in the world, writing or painting or bringing some sort of artistic truth to life, as it is for, someone who is working in a really traditional kind of corporate path? Because I do think that those kind of core principles, there's a lot of overlap. So I tend to look more for principles than I do tactics, because I think good, solid principles then drive relevant, good, successful tactics. But a lot of people get caught up in thinking first about the tactic and not about the principle that it's based on. And so for me, I think part of just learning how to run a company is getting real consistent and clear about what are the core principles that we're basing this off of, and then kind of building up from there.
That's great.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
For your question.
Quick question.
Okay.
Which Friends character do you most relate to?
Did you guys hear that? It's which Friends character do I most relate to? This is kind of easy.
Lizzie Gorman asked that question.
Probably Joey.
How you doing?
Oh, there you go. That's probably it.
And Monique wants to know your most embarrassing moment in Uganda.
Most embarrassing moment in Uganda. There's a lot of them. And there's honestly probably a lot that I never knew were embarrassing. But probably behind my back, people were like, what was that? Okay, there was this one time, and I'll try to keep this short, but it was back in the day where we didn't have our own finishing machine. And the finishing machine is the machine that we use on the sandals, on the edge of the sandals, to make them real smooth. Because when you're first, you're cutting leather and rubber and you're putting it all together, and there's like all these kind of jagged edges and it's not smooth. So you have this big kind of almost like grinding machine. And so we found somebody in the industrial area of Kampala that had a grinding machine that we would pay, that we would take these giant bags of sandals there and we would use their machine. And we would transport them back and forth. And I was on the back of this Boda, which is essentially a motorcycle, and I had 2 giant, they were in like this yellow nylon burlap kind of sacks, bags of sandals, super heavy. I mean, each of them have to be like at least 100 pounds. They've got like 100 pairs of sandals in them each. And the boater driver had one that he was kind of sitting with in front of him in the steering wheel, and then I was kind of hugging the other, and it was between me and the boater driver. And so we were going down, and they just changed the laws in Uganda and to that if you weren't wearing a helmet, you could get arrested. I didn't know that, and my boater driver was not wearing a helmet. And so my boater driver saw a cop and freaked out because he didn't want to, get a fine or get arrested or whatever. And so he took the bike and he spun the bike around, and we were in like 4 lanes of traffic, and he started going the wrong way, like in between cars, like down traffic. And I am like, this is a bad situation. Like, so I'm like, yeah, I'm hitting him. I'm like telling him, I'm like screaming at him to stop. And he won't stop. He's like going. And so there was like a break in the cars before we were getting ready to come up with, because there had been a traffic light. And so there was a break, and I was like, this is my chance if I don't want to go back into that. And so I when we were at the break, I jumped off the back of the bike and like got over onto the side of the road because I didn't want to keep going the wrong way in traffic. But then as soon as I got off the bike, I realized that my bags of Ssekos were still on the bike. And so I like panicked. And so I just start like screaming, and I'm like yelling. No one cared. I'm just like the crazy white woman in the middle of like 4 lanes of traffic. And I'm just screaming, he stole my Ssekos! He has my Ssekos! And in hindsight, realizing that Sseko is the Lugandan word for laughter, and almost everybody speaks Lugandan in English. So literally, I'm the crazy white girl running down the road going, he stole my laughter! He stole my laughter! I didn't actually get those sandals back.
You didn't?
You didn't? No.
I didn't. It was sad,
But you didn't get arrested.
I didn't get arrested, and I didn't get in a massive accident and have a huge head injury, so I feel really good about that.
I have a question. Probably everybody in the room knows the answer. Have you always put the name of the woman who made them? I love that part.
I think so. Always. I'm pretty sure. No, probably not in the very, very beginning because we didn't even have hang tags. So I think since the time that we've had a hang tag, we've had them signed. But I think probably for a year or two, we probably didn't even have hang tags on our sandals. We would get like, for the first 2 years actually, I don't know what was wrong with me. Maybe we couldn't find an iron in Uganda. I'm not sure. But I would get boxes of sandals that would get shipped to my apartment in Kansas City. And part of what I spent, my 12-hour days doing was packing up people's orders. But the girls would send me, I know what it was. When they were out at the school, we actually didn't have electricity, so we couldn't plug an iron in. So they would sew the straps, and if you've ever seen Sseko straps before they're turned inside out and sewn, they're like real curly because they're like, you have to like stretch them out and press them to make them look nice. And so they would send me like batches of like 25 tied in knots. So they're all like crinkled, and then they haven't been ironed, and they've been turned inside out. But I would sit on the floor of my apartment, and I had a hair straightener and I would put one side underneath the couch to give it some tension. And then I would use my straightener, and I would straighten out every single strap. And then I would lace up every single sandal and tie it together and put it in an envelope. So back in those days, we definitely didn't have hang tags. But I think since the time that we started having hang tags, they've been signed. Yeah.
You've mentioned a couple other countries. Are you doing other things now?
Yeah.
Besides sandals?
Yeah. So we really just did sandals for the first almost 5 years. Okay. And then we slowly we had one clutch that we made. We found a partner in Kenya who was making bags. And really over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, we've really expanded our catalog into jewelry, apparel, sandals, leather bags. And it's become a really, really big part of our business, actually. Bigger than sandals, which we're still, I think, kind of known as a sandal company. But the reality is sandals only make up a portion of our revenue now, and a lot of our revenue comes from our other product lines. So we work with artisan partners in Ethiopia. Our Ethiopian partners do a lot of our more complex, like our travel bags and kind of luggage, and our really, really high-end bags come from Ethiopia, largely because in Ethiopia there's a beautiful history and tradition of leather working that does not exist in Uganda. And the quality of leather in Ethiopia, specifically the sheepskin, is like incredible. It's world-class leather. And we obviously make in Uganda. We have one of our menswear products comes from a partner in South Africa. So we're slowly expanding outside of Uganda. And our kind of product mission is really like, we want to find the best suppliers in the whole world that are ethical and that are creating really dignified jobs, and then go in and really kind of tap into those specialties. So that's we're only in East Africa right now, but this fall we're really excited that we will be bringing on a partner in Peru, two partners in Peru actually, and that I think is just going to be the beginning of kind of building a global network of ethically manufactured products, which is really fun.
Do you cooperate with any like other nonprofits, or because there's a lot of nonprofits that are doing micro business and things like that in East Africa?
Yeah, we actually try. Well, our nonprofit partner, we partner really closely with the school that the girls in Uganda graduate from. So those are the type of nonprofits that we want to work with, are like educational institutions, or we have a couple partners who are working with women who are coming out of the commercial sex industry in Uganda, and we have partnerships with them that when women kind of finish their program and have gone through a lot of kind of the therapy necessary, but then they all end up with the same problem, which is like, great, we've got them out of the commercial sex industry. Now what? There's no jobs for them. Those types of partnerships. When it comes to making the products, we actually have a pretty strong preference of only working with for-profit companies. And part of that comes from our vision of wanting to build up the marketplace and build up export and build up companies that are employing people and paying fair wages, also paying taxes and building up the local economy. There are some challenges, I think, when you work with nonprofits that are making things, and that is that they're largely getting subsidized by donors or by kind of philanthropy dollars. So there's kind of an interesting blurring of philanthropy and business that happens that can kind of mess with like just some different market dynamics. Actually, it's probably more complicated and boring than anybody really wants to get into. So we've really said that our preference is to work with locally owned and run businesses that are committed to treating their employees with decency and respect and paying fair wages and contributing to, the equivalent of 401ks and health insurance if it's applicable in that country, and to really take small businesses to the next level by partnering with them to buy their products.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been really fun, especially we've been in Ethiopia the longest, and we have some artisan partners now that Sseko makes up probably 75% of their annual revenue, and they've been able to grow their team and employ tons of people, and so those are the types of partnerships that we love. Like, oh, you were a mom and pop shop and you employed 4 people, and now you have 14 employees, and that's largely because of our partnership, and that's really fun for us.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So the vision of Sseko growing into other partnership marketplaces like Peru is down the road in the fall, correct?
Yes.
What is the vision for the growth of the Fellows program and how that will be moving? We've brought on a lot of sisters in the last few months. It's like blowing up our Fellows Facebook page. So what's the vision for kind of where the Fellows program is headed?
I would say that we want it to be, I would, a decade down the line, like to be the largest and most well-known impact-driven direct sales company in the world, which means as much as we're growing right now, and we are, there's a ton of room and growth, I think, for us to have a really interesting and fun effect in a lot of communities here in the U.S. I would say, honestly, the structure, I'm hoping what we have built in the last 2 years will be a lot of what it looks like 10 years from now. It's really fun to be in a place in our business, which we've never been in before, where it's almost more about, it's about just seeing what we've built and continuing to grow that than it is changing it a ton. And in fact, I would say my biggest hope and the thing that really keeps me up at night and the thing that I think the most about and that gets me most excited is is maintaining the culture that we have right now. And it's just like, man, if we've got thousands of fellows all across the U.S., and we are creating, the idea that there would be a woman in every city, that a woman could get onto our Facebook page and say, y'all, struggling over here, is someone free for coffee? And that there would be someone within 20 minutes that would be able to say, girl, I'm on it. Or someone that's like, oh my gosh, emergency, I just landed this huge trunk show, and like, does anybody have this bucket bag? And someone is like, yeah, and I live 5 minutes. Like, that to me, like, being able to create. Right now, we're still in a place where fellows are spread all over the country, and there's a lot of fellows that don't have that, like, in-person kind of community. And the fact that I could go right now, a lot of times when I go to cities, there might be 1 or 2, or if it's Texas, a ton of fellows. But I love the idea that, like, every city that I land in to go speak or to have a meeting with somebody, I could be like, all right, ladies, like, I'm going to be at this coffee shop, and there would be, like, multiple, fellows and, like, communities that exist even offline and in real life, and that are, just a part of each other's worlds, and, like, go to each other's things, and their kids know each other and support one another, is a huge thing for me. And that doesn't start to happen until we have, like, more growth. And that to me is super exciting. Yeah.
You want to come sit in there?
Do you want me to sit in that seat? Okay. Or maybe Cassie does.
How many fellows do we have right now?
Oh, wow, we've got a lot of things. Okay, to be the only one in Arkansas, scary and potentially amazing. Nicole, are you a pioneer? If you don't think you're a pioneer, you actually may be a pioneer without even knowing it. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. Being the first, and I talked about this a lot at leadership retreat, our first ever leadership retreat in January. But every leader, whether or not you're technically the first in your state or your city, every leader will go through a period of what I refer to as the lone nut stage, where you are like, I'm an idiot. I'm a lone nut. I'm out here. I said yes to this crazy thing, and no one's bought anything from me. No one's joined my team. No one. And to me, it's the scariest part of your leadership journey. But I think it's the thing where you, like, cut your leader teeth, and you're like, but I believe in this, and I have a vision, and I'm going to say yes before anybody else says yes. There's this incredible video. If you just Google lone nut mob dance or something, and there's this great, like, 8-minute TED talk that this guy gives, and it's all about, he shows this guy that's at this festival, and he just starts out, and this guy's he's a lone nut, right? He starts, and in the beginning, he's just dancing, and everyone's kind of looking at him and laughing at him. And then first follower, and then he gets his first follower, and his first follower comes, and his first follower, so now there's 2 of them, right? And then a third joins, and eventually a fourth and a fifth, and then eventually it's like people are literally leaping over each other to get to be a part of this, like, dance. The same people, by the way, that were sitting on the hillside being like, whoa, what, like, that's embarrassing, that guy's over there dancing by himself, are now the people that are like, I'm gonna get left behind if I, like, don't go join this. And so to me, if you are ever in a season where you're feeling like a lone nut, you just got to remember that is the mark of a true leader. And yeah, that for our fellows who are leading teams and who are really building organizations, and even for those of you who aren't, knowing that, like, finding that first follower, and that could be a customer, that could be someone that joins your team, is such an important part of the journey, and recognizing that a lot of people will take more signals from your first follower even than they will. It's the first follower that signals to the people who aren't as willing to lead and be pioneers, that it's like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't so crazy. But if there is any part of you, anyone out there, Nicole or someone else, that's feeling like, oh, I'm interested in this, but I'd be the only one, or my family would think I'm crazy, just go read some books about people who have done interesting things, and find one person who didn't have, for a season, a period of life where they were like, everybody thought I was crazy. Everybody, there was someone who doubted the risk that I was taking. But the thing is, you don't get to have both. You don't get to live a life of purpose and passion and impact, and have a life where at every step along the way, everyone was saying, good job, do that. You're going to be super successful, and you're never going to fail, and it's going to be 100% great. Like, you don't get to do that. You don't get to choose. If you want to do something really lame and boring that everybody looks at and is like, yeah, you can probably do that because it's not that interesting or special, you can do that, and you can be safe, and you can be secure, but you literally you can't choose both. And so it's not about what you want, right? We all want to live interesting lives of purpose and passion. We also want security, and we want people to look at us at every step in the way and tell us we're going to be successful. Duh. We all want both of those things. what you have to ask yourself is, what do you want most? We all want everything, but what do you want most? Do you want to live an interesting life of purpose and passion where you're challenging yourself and you're trying and you're failing and you're learning and you're forcing yourself to be, you know, curious and innovative and gritty? Or do you want more to live a life where it's like, okay, I'm just going to do the least amount, take the least amount of risk so I have the least amount of chance of failure, which, by the way, even if you choose that path, you will fail. Life will happen to you. Like, things will not go your way. So I think even that path of security and affirmation and lack of failure doesn't actually guard us from any of those things. And man, who wants to be the person that at their end of their life says, like, I never took the risk because I didn't want to fail, but then I still had a life that had plenty of failures in it anyway. Mm-hmm. Not me.
We didn't read this list of questions to you. You've magically answered nearly all of them.
Wow! That is amazing.
So that's amazing.
Yeah. I actually asked what the first question was, and Molly's like, I'm not going to tell you.
we got to keep it fresh. Okay, let's see. Who is your biggest inspiration, and who do you look to for guidance?
Oh.
That's a good question, Rachel. Good question.
To me, I don't have a single one. I have all of these different areas of my life. So many, like, I have women that I'm like, oh my gosh, they're such fantastic moms. I have, like, my mom heroes that I'm like, I love the way you raise your children. And I tell my heroes a lot of times, like, by the way, you're my mom, you're one of my mom heroes, and tell me how you raise your kids. And Kid and Ben and I take you out, and I have marriage heroes. We have couples that we really love the lives that they've built together and the partnership that they have, and we pursue them for that. We have our business heroes. We have spiritual mentors and people who are living out their faith in ways that we feel like are really compelling and interesting. I would say our own community and just like our peers are people that we really try to surround ourselves with, people that we're like, we want to be more like you. We want to bend towards the way that you do life and that you see the world. So we're going to try to hang out with you a lot. So for me there, I don't know that, because all of those areas are so important. It gets like pretty nuanced. And then of course I have my like heroes in the sense of the word, that it's like everybody knows their name, and like business leaders that I think are really interesting and inspiring. Mm-hmm. And I'm really grateful for those people. But for me, it's like, it's the day-to-day heroes that change. You know, it's the woman that'll sit across the table from me and tell me her stories about raising courageous kids, that to me is more influential than like some super famous person that runs this like great business and I get to read their book that's been edited 1,000 times, but it's like, I don't get to be in that person's life. And so for me, I value that kind of transparency and relationship even over like wild success.
Heather asked, what part of the Sseko manifesto resonates most with you?
Oh, man, I don't want to cop out, but I kind of feel like I wrote it, you know, like.
It's kind of an unfair question.
I was in Ethiopia, and I went to northern Ethiopia and had this most magical solo travel experience. I'm a really, really big advocate of, if you can, and if you're in a season of life where you're able to travel by yourself, doing that. I think it's challenging and important, and you learn a ton about yourself and the world. And so I was traveling by myself through northern Ethiopia, and I took a day while I was like kind of hiking through these like amazing rock-hewn churches in that are underground in northern Ethiopia, and I wrote the manifesto and just kind of said, like, if we're gonna do this and we're gonna build a community, we're gonna build a brand, I want people to know exactly who we are and like what we value. And so I would say every single part of the manifesto feels like a piece of me. Now there will be seasons, I think, where different ones resonate, you know, right? Where I'll like find myself being like going over one or thinking of one a lot. And so for me, each season there's kind of one that feels like it's really important. I've definitely had marriage seasons where when in doubt, give grace feels super important, right? And like, just like, okay, I'm doubting, give grace, and trying to err to that. But read good books and ask interesting questions feels like it's I'm in a season right now where asking interesting questions feels so important, and staying really like curious and open to innovation and new ideas. And so at every season there seems to be a different one that stands out, but they're all kind of my babies. So I'm gonna say
we'll allow that answer.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay.
Online, but are there?
I have two.
Do you want to
have
sit
two.
here? You want to sit here?
Yes, come sit here.
Okay.
I'll go sit there.
Okay.
I have two. Okay, the first one's really quick.
Okay.
Do you know how many fellows we have right now?
Oh, you know, I just talked to Mary Andrews, who's one of our newest fellows, who's amazing, and she asked at HQ what number she wanted to know the exact number that she was, and I think she said she was, and by the way, we only count active fellows.
Okay.
So that's a little bit different than somehow other companies do, just like however many you've had or that aren't active. I think she said she was 396.
Okay.
So my guess would be that we're, with this month and the sample sale and all of that stuff, definitely over into the 400s right now of active fellows. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the second question is, I have lots of nieces.
Oh, okay.
We have a young woman sitting here with us right
We
now.
do.
A young lady. Kaylani, how old are you? 12. We have a 12-year-old
We have a
young lady
12-year-old,
sitting here
you
with
guys.
us. And I also have a background as an elementary school teacher. So what would you say to young girls right now? Like,
At this moment in history.
at this moment in history, and with all of the things that are happening with technology, and just life is hard for girls right now.
Yeah. I think that I would say that beyond a shadow of a doubt, that everything about who you are is for a purpose and was on purpose. Everything that you think is like, man, I wish I could change that about myself. Man, I wish I was more this. I wish that I was less this. If you can believe and remind yourself that it's like literally not a single part of who you are was an accident or was wrong or was messed up or was overlooked, that would be my greatest hope. And it's not an easy thing. And as an adult, I still struggle with that.
You know, I've already cried once this weekend on this event, Liz. Thank you.
Don't worry.
And I have solidified myself as the crybaby of the Sseko company.
I love it. You know what? We need you. You were made. That is not an accident. That is a purposeful part of how you were created. But yeah, I think that would be it.
Good. I like that.
I love
you.
the fact that you're letting younger girls be part of it. And they told me the story about the girl that you even went to Ben to get his approval.
Oh,
Her
yeah.
making-
I love it. And I love,
And
to
her grandma
me,
takes her places.
Was that Andy?
Yes.
I think it was Andy.
Andy's on our
She's
team.
So
she
sweet.
is. She's
She is on our
amazing.
team.
We've got a couple youngins that are just like, it's so inspiring to me to think about these, young women who are doing things that make grown women afraid and scared, and they're going into it, and they're going even though they are, freaked out and don't know, and that's part of my hope, is to create an intergenerational sisterhood. I value so much my friends who are in their 80s and have so much wisdom and insight, and young women like Kaylani, who's sitting here, that is in a different season of life and has something to teach us and inspire us. I think creating spaces where we're interacting with women from all different seasons of life is really exciting to me.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, y'all.
Any other
Andy was
questions?
15, Kara reminded us. She was 15 when she joined. Isn't that amazing?
crazy.
You're not too far off.
She just hosted an event.
Yeah, she did, and it went great. I think her mom hosted it, and now she's got another one booked, I think, with her aunt that's coming up, and she's just got such amazing energy, and she's an awesome part of our community. All right, well, thank you all for joining us here today, and for those of you who will be watching this recording, we're grateful for you and just for the way that you've engaged over the last couple days with the Sseko sisters. And please know that if there is ever any questions that you have, these are your women. I am always an open door to be a resource, but we know that there are more sisters that are out there that are waiting to be a part of this community. And so as much as I don't believe a physical invitation will likely show up in the mail to live a life of purpose and passion, consider this our invitation to be a part of the work that we're doing and the fun that we're having, and I think the change that we're each experiencing within ourselves. And we're doing hard things, and it's not easy, but the fun thing is we get to do it together, and we get to kind of draw strength from one another and to be inspired by one another's stories, and we're all quite different and running different races and are here for really similar reasons. But then each of us kind of have these really, really unique individual things that are driving us towards this common goal that we have. So thanks for being here, Kara. Oh, I love you too. And thanks, Cassie, for hosting everyone and for hosting us this evening.
So when
afternoon.
are we doing our grand prize drawing?
Oh,
Do we
yeah.
want to do a quick reminder of that?
Oh yeah, so there's probably a survey up on the event page right now, assuming that my timed post worked. It's there. And so anybody who has participated in the event and fills out that survey will be entered into the grand prize drawing. And I think I'll give y'all until about like tomorrow night, because we're all busy.
There you go.
And I want you to put some thought into it. You know, it's not long, but just some good feedback.
So filling out the survey is what qualifies
Yes.
all of their entries,
Yes.
is what you're saying.
Yes,
right?
and I
Okay.
have all of your entries upstairs in a little bucket right now.
So fun!
Perfect.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Well, this
So-
was our first ever Fusion live online event. Didn't know how it was going to go, but I feel great.
I feel good.
So
Yeah.
thanks for being our fellow pioneers. Thanks for hosting, and thanks for each of you who were joining. And Monique wants me to mention custom design sandals. I think what you maybe want me to say is that if you join our sisterhood this month only, you will get, which I think from a value perspective is like 3 or 4 times most of our incentives. It's the biggest value that we've ever done. It just so happens that we launched kind of our big sandal custom platform this month, and so we're correlating that with, if you become a fellow this month, you will get a pair of free custom design sandals, which is a pretty fun way to kick off your business.
And
So-
our grand prize.
And our grand prize
for this event.
is
Oh, okay. So there's 2 ways
Whoa.
to get custom design sandals.
You could get
You could win the
pairs.
giveaway, or you could win the giveaway and join, and then you get 2 pairs.
2 pairs.
You get 2 pairs.
If
There
I'm
you
you,
go.
I want 2 pairs.
I love it. Yeah. Monique's like, yes, that. Also the grand prize. I love
Yes.
it. All right. Well, you
All
guys
right.
are awesome. Thanks for
Bye,
joining.
guys.